Hello and welcome to yet another review by the Omnivorous Reader of a book that is neither science fiction nor fantasy. Surprise, it does happen. So the book in question is, as you will have seen in the thumbnail, right? Because hello YouTube, A Bullet in the Ballet by Caryl Brahms and S.J. Simon. And let's start with the book itself as an entity. As you can see, it's an old Penguin book. It is number 377. It's got that really cute old penguin that looks like he's bending like a banana. And it's got things like mystery and crime written all over the place. It's a thin little book, but it's surprisingly elaborate in its story, and it took a while to read. It's got all sorts of other interesting inclusions, like the books that for sale at the back and stuff like that. What I found really interesting was the quality of the pages. Now, I don't suppose you can really tell, but these are actually very flexible. They aren't singed, they've held their pale colour quite nicely. They're not dark like most of my penguins are. And the reason that I ended up with this book, because I've been watching a YouTuber called Jules Burt. He's a well-known YouTuber, and if you haven't watched any of his, I recommend go and check out his videos. He is a book collector in a way that I, despite the evidence behind me, am not exactly. I read books, and then I find it difficult to part with them usually. Some people collect books for their own sake. And recently, by watching Jules Burt's channel, I've realised that the early penguins all had numbers on their spines. Now, I grew up reading my parents' library, and there were a lot of penguins. There were penguins, there were pelicans, there were puffins, reading the old books and the old doors and all those other types. And this has sort of reignited and reminded me of how much I enjoyed the old penguin mystery and crimes in a way that I don't always find as interesting in modern thrillers, some of which are great, some of which are very, very average. Like the Dan Brown phenomena, which I was into at the time, but which doesn't stay in your mind and isn't really very substantial, in my opinion, in the long term. So when I saw this cute little book that was a number book at that, and in reasonably good condition, I picked it up for $3, I think, $3 at the Chindra bookshop. And I just finished it, and I really enjoyed it. I hadn't heard of either of these authors. So one of them, Caryl Brahms, was a UK English critic, novelist and journalist, according to Goodreads at any rate. And she specialised in the theatre and ballet. She also wrote other things. She died in '82. Her co-author, S.J. Simon, was apparently born in Harbin, China, and was a member of a Russian Jewish merchant family and became a British citizen in the 30s. And these two wrote several books together. Normally, apparently, they had themes of ballet, theatre, etc. I didn't know any of this before I read it. I just found it out afterwards when trying to think of how to review it. Because it's hard to review. If you look at Goodreads or if you look at other review sites, you'll find that the people who have read it are split between 4 and 5 stars, really enjoyed it. That's me, by the way. And 2 or 3 stars, really couldn't see what the fuss was about. And the differentiating mark seems to be, are these people who grew up with the early mystery and crime type penguins, like myself, and enjoy them and understand that theme, or are you a more recent reader who just doesn't get it? And for the time when this was first published, this is not a first edition, by the way, this was first published in 1937. My reprint is from 1949. But I'm going to guess that in the 30s, crime, mystery and humour, because it is very funny in its own specific niche way. I would say that all these genres were not as developed as some modern readers expect them to be. One person I was reading claimed that he could see the prototypes of an awful lot of modern nuanced mystery and crime. And this is meant to be a number 1, by the way, in the sense that a character of Inspector Quill is in it for the first time. But the people who really loved it like the fact that it's funny with that very understated, very antiquated, I'm going to say, type of British humour from 30s and 40s. And they're probably going to enjoy the ballet. Now, I myself was not a ballet fiend, and I only in the course of this book discovered that there's the actual phrase for people who like ballet, or used to be. What was it? It was ballomania, ballomanon, balletomane, I think. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Balletomane, maybe. But my mother was into ballet. She did it when she was young. And she took me to a lot when I was growing up. I enjoyed them. I wasn't passionate about them. And perhaps partly because of that, the satiric element of this book really appealed to me. So I'm going to read you from the first line, because that hooked me and made me laugh in chapter 1 right up. It says, "Since it is probable that any book flying a bullet in its title is going to produce a corpse sooner or later, here it is." And the corpse in question is the ballerina who's dancing a particular role in a particular ballet. And struggling with the pronunciation because there's a lot of Russian, and I think a lot of the Russian phrases are actually satirical. So the person who runs this ballet company, for example, is called Stroganoff. You can't tell me that's not satire, because it absolutely is. But the dancer who is murdered to begin with has a name called Paluk. The ballet is Petrushka, and the role that he was playing is another difficult name. No. Anyway, throwing that out the window. So you've got this ballet company, and it's purely satirical. It's mostly Russian, there's a few French. There's a lot of opportunity for these 30s writers to use Russian phrases, which S.J. Simon would certainly have known very well, being Russian himself. And a lot of caricature and making fun of habits of Russian ballerinas, which Caryl Brahms would have known very well, writing about the ballet as she did. The result is kind of enchanting, and it is very antiquated in the fact that no one could get away with writing a book like this these days. So the main ballerina in this opening night is murdered. He's shot through the head. There's a rather amusing little element where the reviewers in the crowd claimed that his death scene wasn't very good. It wasn't very believable, you know. It wasn't up to standard of the ballet. And Inspector Quill is a very English, very stiff upper lip. I'm not going to say stupid, but he's depicted as hard-headed and not very insightful and not oversensitive. He comes in and is horrified to find that the first thing they did was remove the corpse and put it in its dressing room so that the ballet could continue on. And anyway, he wanders around the theatre fairly aimlessly with his sergeant, I think it's Burroughs, interviewing people and being routinely shocked and horrified by their attitudes, their language, their culture. He's looking for jealousy, but people in the ballet aren't jealous of the things that people outside the ballet are. And it's just full of these really vigorous characters. To me, I found it very amusing. A lot of people will find this to not flow very well, to be jerky. And a lot of the more modern readers that I've seen reviewing this took issue with many other older writers who had adored it, like Woodhouse and so forth. Lots of people really admired the writing of these two authors, and this book in particular. And I can totally see why you would have to be able to slip your mind into a 30s or 40s mentality in order to enjoy it. You would have to disregard the decades since of crime and mystery writing, which have established certain norms that we expect from a modern book, but which you're not going to get in this one at all. You don't have forensics that rule the day. There is a guy who does a type of forensics on a specific pistol when it's found. Police protocol isn't what we know. The police powers don't seem to exist. The whole thing is basically meant to be a humorous satire about the culture of Russian dance companies. And the writing, in my opinion, is very, very beautiful at times. It's flamboyant always. The humour is tricky, but the writing itself is very beautiful and very funny. So, yes, I would totally recommend this for people who think they're going to be able to enjoy this older style of writing and the mystery and crime. It's really actually sort of reinforced my appetite for those older books, and I've got a bookshelf that's going to be built pretty soon, and once that's out, I'm going to start resurrecting my old Penguins and Puffins, pulling them out of the boxes that they're currently stored in, putting them on the shelf, and hopefully rereading some of them. There's a few that I'm going to have to find again before I can reread. This is one of my more favourite mysteries in Penguin crime, and not only has it lost its back cover, but pages are no longer attached. I'm still probably going to reread it, just not carry it around with me. So yes, very pleased to have read this little one. Sorry about the rambling, unprepared review. Do recommend it if it sounds in any way your cup of tea. I don't recommend it if you think Dan Brown is the best crime and mystery author that's ever lived. I don't think this will be quite for you. Anyway, thank you for watching. Read good books. Whatever you enjoy, by the way, is my idea of a good book. So, bye.